The goons over at Fox News had a very Fox News moment. Geraldo blames George Floyd's murder for Democratic trouble on crime messaging. The country went crazy with defund the police. Okay, so let's hear out their argument, and then I'll respond. And I want to dive into this question of, is there really a crime problem? Like, is there really a crime surge? What exactly is going on here? How do you fix it to the extent there is anything going on? Anyway, we'll dive into all those questions. Let's watch this.
No matter what we say, they're not going to listen to us. That's why they didn't listen to us about the 5. If they listened to us at the 5 for 2 years, there wouldn't be a crime problem. So it's up to them to listen to themselves. Listen to the Carvilles. They're the ones.
And not only that, listen to the New York Times.
Yeah.
It says it's time to switch tax and start talking about inflation, which the Dems exacerbated.
Yeah, and stop eating dogs.
But like when they talk, they're willing to, even if they talked about it, they're not willing to change policies, though.
Yes.
So like
you're right.
on inflation, they keep saying that Republicans are going to make it worse, and everyone else in the world has it just as bad as we do. That's not talking about it. They have to actually change the policy.
I think the
Okay, but hold on. On the inflation point, what is the Republican... Name one policy the Republicans have proposed to deal with inflation. One. They haven't. They haven't offered a single one. Their whole point is, inflation is bad, Democrats are in control, so vote for us, we'll just make it better. Magically, apparently. They don't have an argument. They don't have a point. In fact, what they want to do, the policies they're in favor of, would make it worse for working people. They want to cut Social Security. They want to cut Medicare. Rick Scott was talking about raising taxes on the bottom 50% of Americans, the poorest 50%. That would definitely make it worse. They also, cutting taxes for the rich at a time when corporations are already making record profits, how's any of this going to fix inflation? It's not going to fix inflation at all. In fact, if anything, it would be the opposite. Look at what happened with Liz Truss when she tried to implement Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, lower the tax rate for the rich in the UK. She was ousted as prime minister within like 17 seconds. So now, what's the Democratic answer? Point out that corporate profits are a problem, and Bernie's crusading on windfall profits tax. Let's tax the corporations, let's return the money to the people. This is how you tackle inflation. So the idea that like Democrats have no solutions and Republicans have them, that's such bullshit.
The important person in the failure of the Democratic Party is George Floyd. I think that once he was murdered, the country went crazy with defund the police and everything else. So the Democrats led the charge, but very, very unrealistic.
Not the country, though. Just a part of the country. Not even half.
The Black Lives Matter, the organization, not the...
Okay. He says, like, basically, the person who's most responsible for the failure of the Democratic Party at this point is George Floyd. Because after he was murdered, Democrats adopted defund the police. Here's the problem with that. They didn't do that. You could count the number of national Democrats who ran on defund the police on one hand. Cori Bush is the one who's most well-known, and she won her race, by the way. And the reason why she was able to run on that and win is because she was from Ferguson, Missouri, which directly experienced an issue related to this. So the idea that it's a national Democratic messaging, Joe Biden has been going around saying the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Their goal is to hire 100,000 more officers. They're funding 100,000 more officers. On what planet can you say, these Democrats going all in with defund the police, bro? But they haven't done that. It's funny because this is the Republican marketing, the Republican messaging, and like they convince themselves of their own bullshit. Whatever they tar their opponents with, they start to think, yeah, that really is their position. Defund the police was always an 18% position in the country. And you're conflating Democratic politicians with a small activist base. Now, by the way, the other thing that's annoying, and you guys know this because I point this out all the time, is like, they also just straw man what defund the police means, right? Like, if you speak to somebody who actually supports defund the police, they'll tell you, what we mean is, like, cut the budget by a certain amount, 20%, 30%, whatever, and then you take that money and you redirect it to social services and mental health care workers, and so that if somebody's having a mental breakdown, maybe somebody doesn't show up with a gun, they show up trying to help them, right? Okay, now you could agree or disagree with that, but it's a debatable thing, but you should steelman your opposition before responding to it, but they never do that. Their whole point is to strawman the opposition. Now, okay, so let's talk about this issue of crime. Is it true that Democrats are getting clobbered over the head with crime by the Republicans going into the midterms? The answer is yes. Again, Republican messaging is so good it even convinces them of their own bullshit. So they're inflation, crime, inflation, crime. This is all they're doing. This is all they're saying. And it's working. Their poll numbers are going up. Democratic poll numbers are going down. Now it looks like either they'll split, so Democrats will win the Senate, Republicans will win the House, or Republicans will win both. That's what's looking like the most likely scenario at the moment. But let's ask the question substantively. Like, is there a crime wave? And if there is or isn't, what can be done about it? So there's this great article that just came out in BBC. U.S. crime. Is America seeing a surge in violence? So they try to answer this question empirically. As midterm elections approach in the United States, one of the key issues Republicans have been keen to focus on is crime. They have spoken of record crime levels in Democrat-run cities and accused them of being the party of crime under President Joe Biden. We've taken a look at the violent crime trends across the U.S. So the first question, is violent crime going up? According to incomplete data released by the FBI, violent crime fell by an estimated 1% in 2021 compared with the previous year. However, the number of murders increased by more than 4%. So violent crime, according to the numbers we have, which granted is not a complete picture because the way they collect the data is not perfect. Okay, so it's incomplete, but apparently the data's always been incomplete to one extent or another. Okay, violent crime fell 1%, but murders increased by more than 4%. So let's go with 5 or 6%. Okay? The fall in violent crime was largely driven by a drop of nearly 9% in the robbery rate over that period. There are questions about the reliability of the FBI's crime report as it excluded data from some of the biggest U.S. cities, including New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Okay, so to be fair, since the data isn't included from New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and the main argument is that a lot of crime is going up in big cities specifically, the numbers are a little bit unreliable. It's important to point out that last year, the FBI switched to a new data collection system. According to one analysis, nearly 40% of law enforcement agencies have failed to report their 2021 crime figures, so we may only have a partial picture of the most recent crime rates. So violent crimes per 100,000 people in the United States. So this is from 2000 until 2020. According to these numbers, if anything, over the years, there's been a little bit of a decrease. Again, massive asterisks because we don't have all the information, we don't have all the data, and apparently they have a new system, and so it's incomplete. But let's continue. The longer-term trend for violent crime in the U.S. since the 1990s has been generally downwards, although over the past few years it has remained relatively stable according to FBI data. Police departments across the U.S. define violent crime in slightly different ways, but the data generally includes murder, robbery, assault, and rape. In 2000, there were over 500 violent offenses recorded per 100,000 people. In 2021, that figure was down to just under 400. Okay, so in 2000, 500 violent offenses per 100,000 people. Now they say it's 400 per 100,000 people. That's a decrease since the year 2000. But to be fair, again, the data is incomplete. Doesn't include some of the big cities. So you could say it's about the same, right? 400, so 500 per 100,000 people, or maybe a slight uptick. That's roughly what we're looking at here. And then we have U.S. murders. So this might be what people are referring to when they talk about the crime wave, that it looks like there was a slight uptick, particularly in the murder rate. Other violent crime maybe has gone down a touch or stayed the same, but the murder rate has ticked up. Okay, more. Looking specifically at murders, FBI figures show a significant increase in the number per 100,000 people between 2019 and 2020, and then a smaller rate of increase to last year. But again, the 2021 figures may only give a partial picture. Where is violent crime going up? Major U.S. cities have tended to follow the national trend in becoming safer since the 1990s, but some have also seen a sharp rise in the number of murders in recent years. Although in some of the biggest cities in the U.S. known for their high rates of violent crime, the rate of increase in murders has slowed. Okay, so here you have, this is Chicago, for example, 467 in murders in 2018, 417 in 2019, then it ticks up in 2020 and 2021 to 633 and 658 respectively, and then it goes down a touch to 545. Chicago does have a very high murder rate. Chicago has had one of the worst records for murders in the U.S. and saw a big increase from 2019 to 2020, up nearly 55%, but a much smaller rise in 2021, up just 3%. And this year, the data up to mid-October shows a significant decrease in the number of murders recorded by the police department compared to the same period in previous years. So even accounting for the time difference there, they still say it's still lower than other years. Number of violent crimes committed, 2000 to 2020. So again, this is when you include all violent crime. There's a little bit of a downward trend. Similarly, in New York, which saw a big increase in murders between 2019 and 2020, there was a much smaller rise from 2020 to 2021. Data for 2022 is incomplete, but what there is shows the murder rate decreasing. The picture does vary across the country, however. Last December, one U.S. media report said a dozen cities in 2021 had broken records for the number of murders based on data from their local police departments. The New York Times looked at 37 cities across the U.S. with data for the first 3 months of 2021 and said that overall there had been an 18% increase in murders compared with the same period in 2020. But it warned that due to the FBI changing the way crime figures are reported, it could be difficult to identify national trends after that. And they go on to say there's also a delay in reporting by the FBI, which means the most recent figures are not yet available. However, a report in August this year for the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which represents law and order officials from the largest U.S. cities, looked at data for 70 urban areas for the first half of 2022 compared with the same period in 2021. They found that there were increases in murders in nearly 30 areas, including cities like Atlanta, Baltimore, Dallas, Denver, Milwaukee, New Orleans, and Washington, D.C., but the total number of homicides for all 70 areas was slightly down for that period. There's a similar trend identified by a Council of Criminal Justice report from July, which looked at 10 categories of violent property or drug offenses in 29 cities. They found that the number of homicides declined slightly in the first half of 2022 compared with the same period last year, but the homicide rate is still 39% higher than the first half of 2019. It also points out that other categories of crime, such as assault and robbery, have increased over that period. Okay, so look, I know this was a lot to go through, but I wanted to give you all of the information that we have so that you can make, form an informed opinion on what's actually going on here when it comes to the crime wave. So based on everything we just went through right there, what's my overall takeaway? There might be a slight increase in crime. Specifically, murder seems to be the thing that has gone up a little bit. Everything else is very difficult to tell because of the incomplete data and a bunch of other factors, as you just saw. In some instances, it goes down, in others, it goes up. So you could say crime is like relatively the same, violent crime, in all the categories except murders where it has gone up slightly. That's the reality. Okay. Now, so why is this being treated as though there is, a huge crime surge and, it's the Democrats' fault, and here's a video of the knockout game, and here's a video of the robbery, and here's a video of the murder, and... Well, guys, the answer is very simple. Marketing. Republican marketing. You can make people think anything by good PR, good marketing, a good line of messaging. So if Fox News keeps showing 8 different videos a day and you put them on a loop of different violent crimes happening, well, then people are going to get the sense that, oh my God, violent crime is surging. Well, it could just be that the tail is wagging the dog and there were also the exact same number that happened last year, 2 years ago, or 7 years ago, or even more that happened that long ago, but they just didn't highlight it as much, right? Like, maybe there's something I should do, honestly, but I could take examples of horror healthcare stories in this country where people go bankrupt, people lose everything as a result of our for-profit health insurance system. And I could come out here and do 5 of those stories a day. And then everybody was to think, if you just watch this show, the number one issue in the country is our for-profit health insurance system ripping people off, the insurance companies being a total mafia, just parasites, moochers, sharks in between people and their doctors, people and their healthcare. And that would drive a narrative, right? And people would say, yeah, that is the biggest issue in the country. Look at how many stories there are about it. Look at all the evidence and all the details and all the specific individual cases that Kyle has gone through. And if I did that, by the way, that would be a good thing to do, right? That's marketing around an issue and propaganda with no negative connotation around an issue that it makes sense to do it around. But, they do it around crime to make the argument, Democrats are weak on crime, we're strong on crime, we're going to fix it. And so between local news, which always seems to cover crime and hype it up, between local news that does that relentlessly, the nightly news, and then, of course, Fox News that covers it relentlessly, there's this picture that people have gotten that there's been a 100% increase in crime or something, which is just functionally not true. There's been a slight increase in the murder rate. Everything else is maybe the same. Maybe there has been a slight increase in everything else. So then the question is, what do we do about that? Now, this is the part that pisses me off the most, right? Because Republicans are being, yeah, we're the tough on crime people. Okay, well, hold on. You guys say more police equals more peace. Now, that's a debatable claim, right? But let's just go with that for a second. Joe Biden, I told you, wants to hire 100,000 more police officers. Okay. So you want to say, who's tough on crime? Well, by your own logic, Joe Biden is tough on crime because it's 100,000 officers he wants on the street. 100,000 more officers he wants on the streets. That's point number one. Point number two is, how can you say you're tough on crime and Democrats are weak on crime when it was the Democrats who got through a new bipartisan gun law? It was every Democrat and like a handful of Republicans that voted for this, but it's funding for red flag laws, funding for mental health care treatment, funding for school security. So this is something that will help lower the crime rate. You know what else would do it? What else do Democrats want? Universal background checks on gun purchases, ban on high-capacity magazines. Well, the whole point of a universal background check is to keep the guns out of the hands of the criminals. Fewer criminals would get guns. Some would get them illegally, but you would put a roadblock up there in front of a lot of criminals, and they wouldn't be able to get guns if you actually had a universal background check. Democrats are for that. Republicans are against that. So tell me again who's tough on crime. Tell me again who's going to lower the crime rate. Is it the people who want the wild, wild west and any criminal to be able to get a gun legally at any time? I don't think so. I do not think so. So that's the part that pisses me off. Because Biden pushing for 100,000 more cops may have already signed a bill on it. I don't know. I don't know if he's just saying we need to do this or he already did it, right? Wants more cops. The Republicans should agree and credit him with that. And then wants to go further on gun reform. Republicans don't want to do that. And by the way, the other thing is, keep it real. What is one of the biggest predictors of crime? Poverty. Whose programs tackle poverty more? Let's think about it. Is it the people that did the extended child tax credit, which lifted 50% of children out of poverty? Granted, it was temporary because the program was temporary, but is it them, or is it the people who are literally running on cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, and raising taxes on the poorest 50% of Americans? Who's going to reduce poverty more? Let me think about that. Are we really even having this conversation? We shouldn't be, right? So anyway, look, that's the breakdown. It's not George Floyd's fault that Democrats are down in the polls. Not even close. Okay? And the whole defund the police thing has been overhyped. It's the low-hanging fruit, so people on the right like to beat the left up and Democrats up over, you want to defund the police? You want to defund the police? Because guess what? On like 90% of issues, the so-called left-wing position is the popular position. So what Republicans like to do is take any of the issues that they could find where the left has an unpopular position and just tar Democrats with it relentlessly. And that's why they're better at playing politics. They just are. They just are. I mean, Democrats haven't found a way to make Republicans pay a political price for 157 of them voting against gay marriage, 195 voting against a right to contraception. All of them at one point voting against veterans getting health care after being exposed to toxic burn pits. You know, the number of things they voted against lower prescription drug prices. They voted against a tax on stock buybacks. So taxing the fucking mega wealthy. Like, Democrats don't make Republicans pay a political price for their insanity, but Republicans make Democrats pay a price, not even for their insanity, for like a left activist base insanity, which is an 18% thing, which only like a handful of Democrats ran on. Anyway, you get the gist of it. But I'm glad we went through these crime numbers so everybody understands. It's definitely a more complex and nuanced picture than people are giving it credit for, right? But the Democrats do have an argument that they could use. You know, hey, we want to take the guns out of the criminals' hands. These guys don't. So if you want to do the whole we're tough on crime thing, you could easily steal that issue from Republicans. All right, guys, that's the show. I love y'all very much. Everybody do me a favor. Click like on the video. Click subscribe on the video, or on the channel, I should say. Trying to get to 1 million subs. Really hope you guys could get us there. I'm like climbing over your shoulders to try to get there. You guys got to lift me up a little bit. Get on your tippy toes. Just get me over that fence, dog. Also, click the bell notification thingy so that you know every time a video drops. That helps us kind of subvert the algorithm. Leave a comment. That helps with the algorithm as well. And yeah, thank you to all the Patreon supporters of this show. Thank you to all the Substack supporters of Crystal Kyle and Friends. If you'd like to support this show, or Crystal Kyle and Friends, the link is in the video description box below. And of course, everybody now has the option, if you want to, listen on the podcast apps to the full Kyle Kulinski shows. I love you guys very much. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.